Talmud Bavli Tractate Beitzah on page 21b. Top of the page, there's Lachem. Velo leklavim. Indicating for you, but not for dogs. This is the statement of Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Akiva says, when the verse states, every soul, it comes to teach that even the soul of an animal is included. If so, what is the meaning of the verse when the verse states, for you, it means for you, but not for Gentiles. Again, disclaimer, I'm just reading it, I'm not making any opinions for myself. The Gemara asks, what did you see that led you to include dogs among those whose behalf is permitted to perform labor on the festival and to exclude Gentiles? The Gemara explains, I include dogs because, the whole idea of dogs and Gentiles, if anyone wants to ask on this, don't ask me. Go to the New Testament. Because in the New Testament it's written, I should find that chapter. I'll find it right now. Not good to give the children's bread to the dogs. Matthew 15:26 state. It is not right to give the children's bread and give it to the dogs. He was talking to a Gentile woman, so he equated. So if any Gentile wants to have a problem with the Talmud, they'll have a problem with the New Testament as well. It is not right to give the children's bread to the doggies. He called the goyim doggies. Let the children be fed first. It's not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the doggies. It's Mark 7:27 and it's Matthew 15:26. Right? As I state, not my words. The words of the New Testament. So now when the Talmud starts saying the same things, I'm seeing parallels. And what did you see that led to include dogs among those on behalf of who is permitted to perform labor on the festival? Again, I'm making a disclaimer. I'm only reading this Talmud, and I'm only reading the New Testament also. I'm just being an outside observer, reading it and learning it and trying to glean some truth. The same New Testament that called Gentiles dogs is the same New Testament that's saying there's no difference between Gentiles and Jews. And so there's no difference between Gentiles and Jews on one hand. At the same time, it says don't give he's making a difference. So what's the thing? Teiko. The Gemara asks, and what did you see that led you to include the dogs among whose behalf is the one permitted to perform labor on a festival to exclude Gentiles? The Gemara explains, I include dogs because the responsibility of their sustenance is incumbent upon you. One is obligated to feed the animals in his possession. I exclude Gentiles because the responsibility for their sustenance is not incumbent upon you. You're not required to feed the Gentiles, but you're required to feed your dogs. That's what it's saying basically here. Okay? With regard, I don't want any Gentiles getting mad at me here. I'm just reading it. With regard to this Beitzah, Abaye said to Rav Yosef, according to Rav Yossi Aglili, who said that the verse indicates for you, but not for dogs, how are we permitted to cast date stones to animals on a festival? Maybe it's date stones? What's that? Since date stones are not fit for human consumption, they should be considered muktzah, and therefore it should be prohibited to handle them. Rav Yosef said to him, since they are fit for fuel, they may be handled, and therefore they may be given to the animals. Abai objected. This works out well in the case of dry date stones, but in the case of moist ones, maybe they're like very hardened date pieces or something, whatever, which are not suited for fuel. What is there to say? He said to him, they are fit for a large fire, which dries them out, after which they burn well. Abaya raised another objection. This works out well in the case of a festival, when it is permitted to fuel a fire, but in the case of Shabbat, what is there to say? Why should one be permitted to handle date stones on Shabbat? Rabbi Yosef answered, we carry them along with bread. We place the date stones among a loaf of bread and move them together with it. This is in accordance with the opinion of Shmuel. As Shmuel said, a person may perform all his needs with the bread, as long as the bread remains edible. He need not be concerned that he is treating the bread contemptuously. The Gemara comments, and the ruling of Rav Huna that one is permitted to bake for Gentiles on a festival, if they allow a Jew to eat of the bread, differs from the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. As Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, one may invite a Gentile for a meal on Shabbat. One may invite a Gentile for a meal on Shabbat. He's eating some of the Gentiles, as he will certainly not cook for him on Shabbat, and is permitted to give a Gentile food that was prepared the day before. But one may not invite a Gentile for a meal on a festival. This is prohibited as a preventive measure, lest he come to cook more for the Gentile's sake. This indicates that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi holds that one may not prepare more for a Gentile, even if the meal is primarily meant for Jews. Rav Acha bar Yaakov said, even on Shabbat as well, one may not invite a Gentile for a meal due to the wine remnants in the cups. Once a Gentile has drunk wine in a cup, whatever remains in the cup may not be used and therefore considered muktzah. They were just talking yesterday about yain. This is the topic. Wow. Therefore, Jew may not host a Gentile on Shabbat, lest he come to handle the muktzah. Wine remains on Shabbat. The Gemara asks, if so, our cups should also be prohibited, as they too contain wine remnants that have no use whatsoever and should therefore be considered muktzah. The Gemara answers, the remnants in our cups are fit for chickens. The Gemara objects, if so, the remnants in their cups are also fit for chickens. The Gemara rejects this argument. The remnants in their cups are items for which is prohibited to derive any benefit whatsoever. Consequently, they may not be handled at all. The Gemara asks, and let him move what remains of the wine on account of the cup, which is in the vessel, but may not be handled. That may be handled, as the wine remnants should be considered nullified in relation to the cup. Didn't Rava say one may move a coal pan on account of the ashes that can be used to cover filth, even though there are broken pieces of wood on it that have no use? This indicates that one may move something that is muktzah along with something else that one is permitted to handle. The Gemara rejects this argument. There is a difference between the two cases. There, the broken sticks are not items from which it is prohibited to derive any benefit, but are merely muktzah. Whereas here, what remains of the wine in the Gentile's cup is an item from which is prohibited to derive any benefit, and therefore the prohibition is more stringent. Rav Achav Difti said to Ravina, but let it be like a chamber pot for feces, which may be removed from a room, but is repulsive. One should likewise be permitted to discard the remnants of these cups, since it is unseemly to leave them on the table. Ravina said to him, if the cups contain such remnants, they may be removed, but may one make a chamber pot for feces? Lechatchilo. This means ab initio, means to begin with. The sages ruled that one may not invite a Gentile for a meal on Shabbat, as to avoid such complications. In summary of this halacha, the Gemara states that Rava authorized the sage Mar Shmuel from the house of the Exlarch, from the realm of the Reish Galuta, to deliver a public lecture, and the latter taught one may invite a Gentile for a meal on Shabbat, but one may not invite a Gentile for a meal on a festival, as preventive measure, lest he comes to more for his sake. It is related about Maremar and Mar Zutra that when a Gentile would happen to come to their house on a festival, they would say to him, if you are satisfied with the food that we have prepared for ourselves, good, and if not, we will not go to any extra trouble on your account. Okay, fair enough. Straightforward. New Mishnah. Beis Shammai say a person may not heat water on a festival in order to wash his feet, unless it is also fit for drinking, as they hold that kindling a fire on a festival is permitted only for the sake of preparing food, but not for washing it. But Beit Hillel permit one to kindle a fire on a festival even for washing. A person may kindle a large fire and warm himself at it. Okay. A dilemma was raised before the sages. This halacha with regard to a fire, who taught it? Is it a statement accepted by all, including Beit Shammai, and Beit Shammai differentiate between benefit affecting one's entire body and benefit affecting a single limb, so that they agree that kindling a fire to heat one's entire body is similar to kindling a fire for food and is therefore permitted, while heating water to wash one's feet remains prohibited. Or perhaps Beit Hillel taught it, but Beit Shammai did not differentiate between the two cases, and they permit kindling a fire on a festival only for the purpose of preparing food. Come in here a proof from an explicit Beitzah. Beit Shammai say, a person may not make a fire and warm himself at it, but Beit Hillel permit it. It is clear from here that the latter clause of the Mishnah was taught only in accordance with the opinion of Beit Hillel. The Mishnah teaches Rabban Gamliel was stringent about three things in accordance with the statement of Beit Shammai. One may not insulate hot food on a festival for Shabbat ab initio, but rather one ought to do so on the eve of the festival, and one may not set up metal candelabrum that fell on a festival, and one may not bake. See, we're holding on time here. Nice. One may not bake thick loaves on a festival, but thin ones, due to the great effort entailed by preparing the former. Rabban Gamliel said, "From the days of my father's household, they would never bake thick loaves on a festival, but only thin ones." The sages said to him, "What shall we do for your father's household, who are stringent with themselves, but lenient with all the Jewish people, to allow them to bake thick loaves and cakes baked on coals?" Gemara, the Talmud says, Hechi Dami, with regard to the Mishnah's statement that Rabban Gamliel would not permit the installation of hot water on a festival ab initio, the Gemara asks, what are the circumstances? Hechi Dami, what are the circumstances? If it is referring to a case where he prepared adjoining cooked foods, Erev Tavshilin, what is the reason that Beit Shammai prohibited it? And if it speaks of a case where he did not set aside Erev Tavshilin, what is the reason for the lenient ruling of Beit Hillel? If we say it's from heaven, then same thing. Rav Huna said, actually, I will say to you that the Mishnah is referring to a case where one did not prepare an Erev Tavshilin, but Beit Hillel hold that the sages nevertheless permitted him to prepare what he needs for his basic sustenance. The Gemara comments, and Rav Huna conforms to his standard line of reasoning, as Rav Huna said, with regard to one who did not prepare an Erev Tavshilin on the eve of a festival. Others may bake one loaf of bread for him and cook one pot of food for him. Wow, we made it.